Hello, everyone. My name is Ava, and today I want to share a part of my past that I can never forget. Every time I think about it, my heart feels heavy, and I can't help but blame myself. This is a story I wish had never happened, but life doesn't always make things easy. This story begins several years ago when I was 18 years old. At that time, I lived with my family in London, a city known for its beauty, but one that also hides its own darkness. Back then, I felt like I had everything. My family was successful and well off. My father was a busy businessman, and my mother was a talented interior designer. Despite their demanding schedules, they always tried to make time for me and my two older twin brothers, Nathan and Jack. Nathan and Jack were 2 years older than me. If I had to describe them, I'd say they were incredibly charming, intelligent, and caring. Being the youngest in the family, I was always the apple of my parents' eyes. They made sure I never lacked anything, whether it was material things or their attention and love. But I always felt that no matter how much my parents loved me, the bond I shared with Nathan and Jack was something deeper and more special. They weren't just my brothers, they were my protectors, my confidants, and my best friends. Nathan and Jack always looked out for me. Whenever I needed help or found myself in a tough spot, they were right there by my side. When I felt insecure about my appearance, Jack would reassure me and teach me how to carry myself with confidence. Nathan always helped me recognize my inner strength. Once my classmates at school teased me because of my outfit. I came home in tears that day, and Nathan and Jack were the first to comfort me. Not only that, but they also went to school and talked to those kids. Without resorting to violence, they handled the situation with firmness and intelligence, ensuring that I was never bullied again. Every moment I spent with them was precious. They would always call me their little princess and jokingly say it was their lifelong duty to protect me. I still remember a summer afternoon when I walked into the living room where they were watching TV. They were so engrossed in a movie that they didn't even notice me enter. Playfully, I walked up to them and plopped down on the sofa between them. Jack laughed and said, "What's your plan now?" while Nathan gave a soft smile. When I looked at the screen, I realized they were watching a romantic movie. Jack, teasing me, covered my eyes with his hands and said, "This isn't for you." Laughing, I said, "I'm not a little kid anymore." These small moments with them were the highlights of my life. They were the foundation that held me up during difficult times. But this story doesn't end here. There came a moment in my life that changed everything forever. That moment still lingers in my memories, and I'm gathering the strength to share it with you one day. I slowly began to realize that Nathan and Jack's love for me was different from any other bond. They were my biggest supporters during my teenage years, especially when I felt insecure about my appearance and confidence. Jack taught me how to apply light makeup and assured me that I was beautiful just the way I was. Nathan always helped me choose clothes that made me feel comfortable and confident. They made me feel like the most cherished little sister in the world. There was something truly special about their affection. They weren't just my brothers, they were my emotional anchors. When my parents were busy with work, Nathan and Jack ensured I never felt lonely. They took me to school, helped me with my homework, and made sure I was always okay late at night. If I couldn't sleep, I'd knock on their door, and they would always welcome me with warm smiles. Sometimes they'd tell me funny stories or just sit by my side until I drifted off. These little moments convinced me that their love for me was deeper and more meaningful than anything else. However, the love I thought was pure and innocent would one day lead to an event that changed everything in my life. I'm not sure anyone else will ever fully understand it. When I was 18, something happened that altered my world forever. I'll share the rest of the story when I have the strength to face that part of my memory. The three of us siblings were incredibly close. Sometimes I'd do silly things without fear of being scolded. I'd suddenly jump up and hug them or sit on their laps if they were just relaxing somewhere. Nathan and Jack weren't just my brothers, they were my best friends. One summer afternoon, sunlight streamed into the living room through the large window. Nathan and Jack were sitting on the couch, fully engrossed in watching TV. They didn't even notice when I walked into the room. Feeling playful, I climbed onto the couch and plopped down on both of their laps. Nathan was startled, while Jack burst out laughing. "Little sister, what are you doing?" Jack asked, laughing. I said nothing and leaned my head on Nathan's shoulder, sitting comfortably in his lap. "What are you two watching so intently?" I asked. But they didn't answer immediately. When I glanced at the screen, I realized they were watching a romantic movie. At that moment, the movie had reached its emotional peak. The characters on the screen were embracing and sharing a passionate kiss. As soon as I noticed the scene, Nathan and Jack both became a little uneasy. Jack smiled awkwardly and quickly covered my eyes with his hands. "Don't look, Ava. This isn't a movie for kids," he said teasingly. I laughed as I tried to wriggle free from his grip. "I'm not a kid anymore. I'm 18 now," I said playfully. Deep inside, I found the scene on the screen rather intriguing. I kept laughing and teasing him while trying to peek through Jack's fingers. In the middle of this playful struggle, I shifted slightly to balance myself on Jack's lap. Without realizing it, my hand brushed against something in his pocket. The hard, warm sensation startled me, and my heart started pounding. I quickly pulled my hand back, overwhelmed by embarrassment. I couldn't gather the courage to look at Nathan or Jack. "I'm sorry," I stammered awkwardly, then quickly stood up and rushed to my room. The door slammed shut behind me as I leaned against it, my heart racing wildly. Sitting down on my bed, I replayed the moment in my head repeatedly. The image of the remote control in Jack's pocket flashed over and over in my mind, and my face turned crimson with embarrassment. Am I overthinking this, or was it just an accident? I couldn't tell, but the shame and awkwardness lingered, keeping me confined to my room. I couldn't stop worrying about what Nathan and Jack might think of me. It wasn't just the accidental touch, it was the unsettling realization that I had crossed an unspoken boundary. The closeness we shared, which always felt natural and innocent, now seemed delicate and fragile, a line I never even knew existed. After hiding in my room for a while, I decided to head back to the living room. I was hungry, and I assumed my family was probably waiting for me to join them for dinner. But the events of the afternoon were still fresh in my mind, and I couldn't shake off the embarrassment. "Maybe it wasn't as serious as I think," I reassured myself. "Perhaps they've already forgotten about it." Slowly and quietly, I opened the door and tiptoed down the hallway, hoping to avoid their gaze. As I approached the living room, I paused to listen for any sounds. The room seemed empty, and I let out a sigh of relief. "They're probably in the kitchen or somewhere else," I thought, feeling slightly more at ease. I cautiously stepped into the living room and glanced around. It was quiet and empty. "That's strange," I thought, as I walked toward the couch where we had been sitting earlier that afternoon. I found myself staring at the TV, trying to figure out what channel they had been watching. Suddenly, I noticed two faces leaning over my shoulder from behind. "What are you doing, Ava?" Jack's voice whispered right next to my ear, making me jump. Nathan burst into laughter on the other side. "You look like a thief," he exclaimed loudly. Startled, I let out a small scream and turned around quickly to see them standing right behind me. Their sudden presence almost stopped my heart, and we all jumped at the same time. Nathan and Jack exchanged glances and burst into uncontrollable laughter. I couldn't help but laugh along with them, even though my heart was still racing. "Oh my God, you two scared me so much," I said, pretending to be angry, but my laughter gave me away. "That was fun," Jack said mischievously. Nathan patted my head and added, "Come on, let's eat. The whole family's waiting for you." I pretended to be angry and said, "You two scared me so much." But I couldn't stop laughing. It felt like I had just been teased playfully. Nathan raised his eyebrows with a mischievous smile, while Jack patted my head lightly and said, "Are you planning to eat anything, or are you going to keep us hungry?" Laughing with them, I realized that all the awkward tension from the afternoon had disappeared. I reassured myself that maybe the moment I had been worried about wasn't as serious as I had thought. If it had been, they wouldn't have been joking so casually. This thought gave me some relief, and I decided to act as though nothing had happened. I smiled brightly and tried to change the subject. "What were you two doing behind me? Were you trying to scare me?" Jack shrugged, pretending to be serious, and said, "Yeah, just wanted to spook you a little, but I didn't expect you to jump so much." Nathan added playfully, "Your reaction was priceless." Who would have thought you'd jump like that? We all burst out laughing, and the mood felt light and cheerful again. Nathan placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "All right, let's eat. The whole family's waiting for you." I nodded with a smile and followed them to the kitchen. Everyone was already gathered around the dining table. My parents glanced at me and smiled softly. I sat down with them, feeling the warmth of the kitchen and the peaceful, cozy atmosphere. Dinner was filled with laughter and conversations. My parents talked about their work, while Nathan and Jack occasionally teased me with light-hearted jokes. I joined in the fun, and the feelings of embarrassment from earlier in the day completely faded away. After dinner, I stayed back to help my mum clean up the dishes before heading to my room to get ready for bed. As I lay in bed, I thought about the events of the day. I reflected on the awkwardness of the afternoon and how it had all turned into light-hearted moments with my brothers. While a tiny hint of embarrassment lingered, I no longer felt worried. Smiling to myself, I reassured myself that everything was fine. Nathan and Jack were still the same amazing brothers who made me feel safe and loved. With that thought, I drifted off to sleep peacefully. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. My room was separated from Nathan and Jack's rooms by just a thin wall, so even small sounds like movies or music could be heard. Normally, I was known for sleeping in late, but that morning I found myself waking up at 7 a.m., feeling surprisingly refreshed. It felt like I was still dreaming, or maybe the sunlight streaming through the curtains was blinding me. But no, after a few minutes of waking up, I realized that a strange sound was coming from the next room. My room was situated between Nathan and Jack's rooms. The walls in our house were so thin that even the slightest noise would travel easily. I was used to hearing them playing games or talking, but this time the sound was different. At first I thought they were watching an action movie, but the longer I listened, the more certain I became that something was off. The sound wasn't normal. It had an odd rhythm, sometimes long, sometimes short. My heart started pounding, and a thought came to my mind that made my face flush red. I didn't want to believe it, but the sound became clearer, and it was obvious that it wasn't music. It wasn't just normal conversation either. Even though the walls muffled the noise, I could still hear heavy breathing and sharp, intimate sounds. I tried telling myself to ignore it, but the more I listened, the more convinced I became that Nathan and Jack were watching something personal. A wave of shame washed over me. Why did I have to wake up? Why did I have to hear this? My heart was racing, and it felt like my face was on fire. I covered my face with my hands, trying to stop the thoughts that were flooding my mind. "This is private," I told myself. "Everyone has seen things like this before." The room started to feel uncomfortable. We were always so close, and I had never imagined facing a situation like this. I didn't want to hear it, but the sounds were becoming clearer and clearer. I got up, stepped out of bed, and quietly opened my door. I didn't know what I was planning to do, but I couldn't stay in my room any longer. I tiptoed down the hallway, trying my best not to make any noise. As I approached Nathan and Jack's door, the sounds became so loud that it felt like the walls had disappeared. I stood there, unsure of what to do. My heart was pounding, and I felt embarrassed, confused, and uncertain. I knew these things happened, but hearing it coming from Nathan and Jack's room was something entirely different. I bit my lip, torn between going back to my room and staying where I was, curiosity holding me in place. As I tried to calm myself, suddenly the door swung open. I stumbled back in surprise. Jack stood in front of me, his expression full of shock, as though he had been caught doing something he shouldn't have been doing. We stood there, staring at each other as if time had frozen. The silence was unbearable. Jack cleared his throat, breaking the tension. "Ava, what are you doing here?" he asked in a nervous tone, avoiding eye contact. His face was flushed, and I could tell he was just as embarrassed as I was. I couldn't bring myself to look at him. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely speak. I was just passing by," I stammered. It wasn't convincing, but it was the only thing I could think of. At that moment, the noises from the room abruptly stopped. Nathan stepped out from behind Jack, his face just as red. They both seemed to be searching for something to say, but neither of them spoke. The awkward silence hung heavily in the air, and I felt even more uncomfortable. With a faint smile, trying to hide my embarrassment, I said, "I was just passing by." I repeated myself, "Nothing, I'm leaving," and quickly turned around. Eager to escape the situation, I walked away in haste. When I reached my room, I shut the door behind me and leaned against it, letting out a deep breath. My heart was still pounding, and I felt an odd sense of shame. I tried to regain my composure, but I couldn't stop replaying the strange scene in my head. The image of Jack opening the door and Nathan stepping out afterward lingered in my mind. The tension between the three of us during that moment felt overwhelming, and I couldn't shake off the feeling. I kept wondering what they were thinking about me at that moment. Maybe they felt just as awkward as I did, or perhaps even more. What troubled me the most was that I had overheard something I wasn't supposed to. Maybe it was just an unfortunate accident, but I feared that my perspective of Nathan and Jack would change. They were my closest companions, my brothers, my protectors. I buried my face in my hands, trying to block out the negative thoughts. But the more I tried to ignore them, the stronger they became. I told myself, it was just an unexpected moment, something no one wanted to happen. Perhaps I was overthinking it, but I couldn't help it. I started pacing around my room, trying to shake off the uneasiness. "It was just an accident," I muttered to myself, as if convincing myself it wasn't a big deal. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Just then, I heard a knock at my door. My heart sank. I knew it couldn't be my parents. They usually didn't knock when they needed something. It had to be either Nathan or Jack. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves, and opened the door. Jack was standing there, still looking a bit flustered. His eyes were cast downward, and it seemed like he was trying to gather his thoughts. He awkwardly scratched his head and gave me a hesitant smile. "Ava, I'm sorry for what happened. It's not what you think. Nathan and I were just watching a movie, and maybe the timing wasn't great." I stood there for a moment, frozen, looking at him with hesitant eyes. His face was red, his expression uncertain, and I could feel the confusion in his voice. At that moment, Nathan appeared behind him, his face showing the same embarrassment and awkwardness as Jack's. They both seemed to be searching for the right words to explain, but the tension was so thick that none of us could speak. It felt like we were all waiting for someone to break the silence. The stillness was so overwhelming that I realized if I didn't do something to change it, it would only get worse. Taking a deep breath, I decided to break the ice. Smiling slightly, I tried to look natural as I said, "Don't look so tense, I was just passing by." Jack and Nathan exchanged glances as though they were silently communicating. After a brief pause, Jack sighed softly and asked, "Are you sure, Ava, that you're okay?" His voice carried a hint of uncertainty. I quickly reassured them, "Absolutely, I'm fine. In fact, I think I like you both even more now," I added playfully, hoping to lighten the mood. Both of them looked at me with surprise, as if they couldn't quite believe what I had said. After a moment of silence, I decided to ease the awkwardness further. Taking Jack's hand and motioning toward Nathan, I said, "Let's go to my room and talk. Consider it my way of making up for the awkwardness." They both seemed slightly taken aback by the suggestion, but eventually nodded and followed me. Once we reached my room and sat on the bed, I turned to Nathan and teased, "So, what was the movie you were watching that made you lose track of time?" Nathan laughed awkwardly, covering his face with his hands. "Oh, Ava, stop teasing. We didn't think you'd actually hear it." Smirking, I replied, "I thought you played it deliberately so I could hear." My playful tone made both Jack and Nathan burst into laughter, and the tension in the room began to melt away. After chatting for a while, a thought crossed my mind. Looking at them, I debated whether I should bring it up. Summoning a bit of courage, I asked, "What if we tried something like that movie?" My words left them stunned for a moment. Nathan looked at me with wide eyes and asked, "Are you serious?" I replied in a low voice, "I just thought, what harm could there be in trying? I just want to know how it feels." Jack glanced at Nathan and then at me. After a brief silence, Nathan sighed and said reluctantly, "All right, but just this once." And no one can know about this. The room fell silent once again. We sat there, a strange energy surrounding us. Slowly, we began, taking each step cautiously. The experience was different, but we knew this was something we had to leave confined to that moment alone. I'm not sure how much time had passed, but it felt like the world around us had disappeared. It was just the three of us. When the sun had set, we finally got up, and the room was bathed in a soft glow. None of us said a word. We just lay there next to each other, breathing in unison. The awkwardness I had feared was entirely gone. Instead, I felt a deep connection between us, as if we had forged an unspoken bond. It felt like we had just gone through something profound together. Later, we went to the kitchen to prepare lunch. Everything felt oddly natural, as though nothing extraordinary had happened. But deep down, I knew the dynamics between us had shifted. Strangely, instead of regret, I felt a new sense of closeness that had brought us even nearer. At one point, Nathan looked at me with a soft smile and asked, "Are you okay?" I nodded, matching his smile. "I'm fine. In fact, I think I love you both even more now," I replied, my words making me blush. They took my hands warmly, their eyes filled with affection. "We love you too," they said, and we continued as if nothing unusual had occurred. From that day onward, our relationship subtly but unmistakably changed. The bond we shared became deeper, different. There was no longer any awkwardness, and it felt as though the invisible walls that once existed between us had dissolved. Each time our eyes met, I sensed a new understanding, an intimacy that hadn't been there before, but inside, I knew what we did was wrong. Unknowingly, we had crossed a line, one set by society and morality. I told myself it was youthful curiosity and impulsiveness that led us there. I don't try to justify it, but I acknowledge that it was our feelings and curiosity that brought us down this path. I don't regret it, yet at times I still feel a vague unease. We don't talk about it now, as if we've reached an unspoken agreement to leave it in the past. Nathan and Jack look at me differently now. They are gentler, more cautious, as if afraid of hurting me. As for me, every time I meet their gaze, my heart races, a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Our curiosity took us down an unexpected road, and though our bond feels closer than ever, I know things will never be the same again. Looking back, I understand that my impulsive actions left an indelible mark on our relationship, one that can never be erased. We crossed a boundary guided solely by our emotions and curiosity, and even though no one else knows, I can't hide from myself. The realization of how immature I was troubles me deeply. What I've learned is this: curiosity is natural, especially when you're young, but not all curiosities should be explored, particularly those that risk breaking the core principles of life. Boundaries aren't meant to confine us. They are there to protect us from making mistakes that could lead to lasting damage. Staying grounded and exercising restraint is the most important takeaway from my story. Through my experience, I want to tell everyone, Don't let fleeting curiosity lead you to poor decisions. Think before acting on intense emotions. The moment may fade, but its consequences can last forever. Value the relationships in your life and don't cross boundaries lightly for temporary desires. True love and lasting relationships are built on respect, understanding, and responsibility. That is what truly matters.